Welcome. I'm Andrew Denieri, Associate Director of the Atlantic Council's Eurasia Center. Thank you for joining us for this event today, an inside look at Russia's abuses against Ukraine's frontline communities. This is a bit of a special event because this is also the world premiere of the documentary short film Being Near: Faith in the Frontline City of Kherson from director Zachary Terrence in partnership with the Eurasia Center. We're going to screen the film. We're going to hear a bit from Zach about the making of the film, his time in Kherson, and then we're going to break into a panel discussion with some distinguished experts and officials from Ukraine. And then we'll have a chance for audience questions toward the end, and that'll be our hour together. Thank you all for being here, and without further ado, please stay tuned. We're going to watch Being Near: Faith in the Frontline City of Kherson.
Царю святий, милосердний, многомилостивий, Господи Ісусе Христе, Сину і Слово Божого, не хочу смерти.
Буквально декілька днів Херсон смакував, дихав, жив, пив свободу. Люди важко потерпали, але вони були щасливі. Бо свобода, так? В якій ми, українці, нам природньо жити. Але пройшло небагато часу, і росіяни почали обстрілювати. І одним із перших, що було обстріляно, це був обстріляний наш церковний двір.
Ось така наша бабуся Валюся, яка багато потрудилася і для цієї церкви.
Колись поважні пані приходили зранку, вдягалися зі своїх домівочок до нас до церкви, всі вдягнені, пахучі, гарні. А тепер збираємо всіх, п'ємо чай, каву, бо один генератор на всіх. Дякувати Богу за добрих людей. Це все гуманітарна допомога.
Хай Бог дає здоров'я, вашу доброту.
Дрони, коли працює. Безмежно вам дякую.
На жаль, ми сьогодні не можемо побувати в нашій церкві, бо вона знаходиться в зоні обстрілу. Зачинена, ми туди не можемо ні піти, ні поїхати, бо російські дрони, артилерійські обстріли. Багато людей загинуло і багато поранених. І навіть зараз, коли ми з вами розмовляємо, то східна частина Херсону перебуває під атаками російських дронів, під обстрілами з градів. І росіяни весь час намагаються знову окупувати Херсон. Але історія нашої церкви, вона вже більш як столітня, аж до 2023 року, коли в жовтні місяці, 8 числа жовтня місяця 2023 року, росіяни дуже сильно обстріляли наше селище і обстріляли церковний двір. І ми зрозуміли, що наступне богослужіння вони можуть просто зруйнувати храм.
Господи, помилуй. Обстріл кацапами нашої церкви, нашого селища. В церковний двір.
Вони безжальні до дорослих, до дітей, до цивільних. Їм немає різниці. Ви розумієте, вони, вбивши українця, як то кажучи, вони позбавляються ще одного ворога. Станом на сьогодні більшість із наших вірян вже не мають своєї хати. Вони знищені. Дуже багато поранених, чимало вбитих. І кожен день додається, росіяни додають нам болю. Війна виявилась довгою. Війна триває. І нам дуже важливо, щоб світ знав правду про нас і про них. Там кожен Божий день 2-3 вбитих і 5-6 поранених, цивільних. Притому росіяни атакують, бачачи, що це точно ж цивільна людина. Наприклад, на днях ішла бабця, їй 80 років. Ішла по вулиці, йдучи до себе там додому, і дрон догнав, подивився і скинув на ту бабцю. Зараз вона знаходиться... Вибухівку, так. Вона знаходиться в лікарні, в неї поранено весь тут пояс, в неї перебита рука. І таких випадків дуже багато. Це прямо якесь полювання на людей. І бачачи це, невже світ може казати, добре, давайте от в тому стані зупинимо. А як відповідальність? Невже злочинець не має відповідати? Українські капелани, які у війську, в них є такий девіз «бути поруч». І якщо це відео будуть дивитися американські християни різних конфесій, але ті, хто вірує, що Ісус Христос є Син Божий, то, дорогі брати і сестри, будьте з нами поруч. Нам дуже важко. Ми йдемо хресною дорогою. З нами йде наш Господь Ісус Христос. Не відмовте від того, щоб пройти з нами цю хресну дорогу нашого життя. Дякую.
I now want to bring in the director of the film, Zachary Tarrant, into our event here. Zach, thank you for filming and directing this documentary. It's incredibly powerful and really well done. And you've been a really good partner to the Atlantic Council the whole way through. So thank you. Congratulations on the film. Tell us a little bit more about how you made this film and maybe how things in Kherson have changed since you visited for this project.
Yes, of course. And thank you, Andrew. And thank you to the Atlantic Council Eurasia Center for giving me the opportunity to shoot this and to really show more people the stories of Father Valentin and his congregation. The more people that see this is the better. And my work is oriented around people being able to see what is happening to civilians in these frontline cities. I've been working in Ukraine for 3 years as a documentary filmmaker and photographer. My work focuses on the impact on civilians in frontline cities of this war. And it's very interesting to me, just the breadth of impact. I mean, you have places across the country, whether you're in frontline areas like Kherson or places like even in the West in the mountains, where there's in every city, there's plaques for lost soldiers, or there's stories of husbands being sent off to war, or in Kherson, where every day people are fighting and every day people are out helping each other, helping their communities. The impact is across the entire country. And to me, Kherson is an especially special city for me. I spent a lot of time there. I was there during the period of the flooding, and since then, multiple times working with various aid groups. And my work is really made possible by these aid groups who help their communities and help civilians, and really allow me to get an insight into people's lives and spend time with people and hear stories and talk to them and really hear about what's been affecting them. Specifically about this film, I want to focus, we'll talk a little bit about Father Valentine. This is a short segment from a larger project. So the final project will be about an hour long, going into Father Valentine's full story, as well as the story of Father Igor, who's another clergyman in the city working, who introduced me to Father Valentine. And what's especially impactful for me about these groups, and I think you'll find is the faith communities and the work they do in these areas, and just the dedication and the risks they take. Father Valentine's there every day with his congregation in his church, helping people, helping his community, helping anyone he can. Father Igor is the same way. Actually, about a month before we filmed the full film, the longer version, Father Igor his car was struck by a drone while he was delivering aid. He was injured. The first thing he did was try to go deliver a sermon while he was still bleeding. But then, of course, they made him go to the hospital. And a week later, he was back sermoning, back helping people. These people love their city, they love their people, and they have the faith to continue against like unimaginable odds. The term being near that Father Valentine used in this film, I think it's been a rallying call for me. And I think it's a rallying call actually for people who support Ukraine to continue being near to the struggle and being near to the people who are being affected by this. And I want to talk a little bit about Kherson specifically, because this was filmed back in spring, and the situation has only gotten much worse since then. In the film, you see it says the Russians are 4 kilometers from the city. Now, the closest point they are to Ukrainian held positions is a kilometer. The Russians have declared the entire city a red zone, and these are terms, red zone, human safari, but what that actually means, the Russians have given carte blanche for their soldiers to target anything that moves in the city. Aid vehicles, ambulances, civilians on the street. And what that really means, and I really want to kind of dive into this on the human side, is everyone is a target. Just today, 2 13-year-old boys were hit by a drone strike in their backyard. Obviously, this is Father Igor was struck. I've done work with EMT groups in Kherson, and they say there's more risk having an ambulance because they're targeting ambulances. One anecdote from this is I remember 3 months ago, I was watching some footage that came from Kherson about an elderly man who was struck by an FPV drone on his bicycle. And in the video, I didn't know whether he had survived or not. And of course, the Russians post these things to Telegram channels, and there's comments, cheering on the killing of Ukrainians. It's very, very, very dark. When I was working with this EMT group, they gave me their body cam footage, and I was going through it to help put this documentary together. And I saw in one bit of footage him coming up to this man on the bicycle, and it was the same man who had been struck by the drone. And he had unfortunately died. And I think the thing that I really want to get into here is that these FPV strikes, they can see exactly who they're targeting. There's no ambiguity. They can see exactly who they're hitting. So this is elderly people. They're definitely non-combatants. They're definitely people. They can tell who they're doing it on purpose. And like they said in the film, like the idea that the Russians have any Ukrainians a target. And so that's what people live in this. That's how they're living in the city right now. It's the point where people really live day by day. I have another contact there who I was talking to, who was telling me, we're talking to them about trying to get out of the city, maybe to have a breath of a week to see their family. They're a critical worker there, so they can't leave. And they told us, I can't think about next week. I wake up in the morning, I'm grateful I'm alive. I speed on the bus to work because the buses have to drive really fast because the FPV owners are targeting the buses as well. I thank God that I made it to work. I can't think about tomorrow. I can only think about the next minute, next hour. And for me, I think focusing on these human stories is really important. And I will end here with kind of like my call to action if I can, but I had the privilege to work with Alexander Matvichuk, who is a human rights lawyer, the Nobel Prize winner in 2022, and runs the Center for Civil Liberties in Kyiv. And she was telling me about her push now to refocus the conversation around this war on the human element. Obviously, right now, there's debates in our country about sending military aid to Ukraine. And of course, that's essential. Without that military aid, Ukraine will not survive. But part of the conversation she wants to focus on is what that actually means. And that means the survival of people. That means the ability of Ukrainians to self-determine, to have their freedom. that also means protecting them for what would happen if they are occupied again. Russia, the people you see in this film would not be safe. They would most likely be tortured or killed. That's what Russia does. And occupation puts this under silence. You can't see. They destroy language, they destroy culture, and they disappear people and they torture people. And for me, my call to action, I'm sorry, I'm talking a little bit too long, would be do what you can to convince people around you to support this. Obviously, in the US, if you're a US watcher, it's important, write your congressman, write your senators, because the Senate is generally bipartisan supported for this, and they will read your letters and show them your support for supporting Ukraine. But also when you're talking to your loved ones, your family members, your colleagues, one at a time, and use the language of the human impact, that this isn't just an overseas war we're supporting. This is us supporting the ability of the people to be free, to have self-determination, to practice their faith freely, and to survive. And yes, that's what I'd like to end on that. And again, thank you for giving me the chance to speak here. And I'm really excited to see the panel. It's amazing what you put together, and thank you.
Thanks very much, Zach, and congratulations again on the film. Yeah, and I hope that human element is something that we can bring out in our discussion today. And so, right now it is my distinct pleasure to introduce all of the experts and officials we have here for the discussion portion of our event. We have Reverend Mikhailo Britsin, who's the director of the Religious Freedom Initiative at Mission Eurasia, Shelby Maggot, Deputy Director of the Atlantic Council's Eurasia Center, Mayor Alexander Sinkevich, the Mayor of the City of Mykolaiv, and Mr. Mikhailo Spasov, Representative of the Commissioner for Human Rights at the Verkhovna Rada of Ukraine. So we have the rest of the hour with our panelists here. They've been very generous with their time. I'm going to kick things off with a few questions, but then encourage everyone watching online to send your own questions in to askac.org. That's askac.org. In the last few minutes of our event here, I'll go through them and I'll pitch them, as many as I possibly can, to our panelists here, and we'll get their responses. So to start with, I want to go to Mr. Spasov. And just right off the top, what are the most common human rights violations committed by Russian forces that you and your colleagues see in the temporarily occupied territories and in liberated and frontline communities as well?
Thank you, Andrew. Thank you for the question. Hello, everybody. It's first of all, would like to provide my gratitude for allowing for me to speak today, and to Atlantic Council for highlighting this this cruelty which Russia is doing almost every day to our country. And again, great words of appreciation to Zachary for this movie. What we seen today, we actually seen every day. And until we stop Russians, we will continue to see this, unfortunately. We have to understand that Russian Federation has been systematically violating the rights of the Ukrainians since 2014, for more than 11 years already, and thousands of civilians, as we recently seen in this movie, were illegally not only detained but killed by the Russian occupation authorities. And unfortunately, it's not soldiers. It's the stories about journalists. It's the stories about human rights defenders. It's the stories of the religious leaders, civil servants, police officers, and even we document the atrocities of the representatives of the international organizations. Mr. Lubinets, Ukrainian Parliament Commissioner for Human Rights, Ombudsman of Ukraine, and our office are working tirelessly to document and to address the brutal human rights violations which are committed by the Russian force in Ukraine. And we have to admit that the scale of these abuses is tremendous, and the impact in temporarily occupied territories, they impact in the liberated areas of Ukraine, and of course the frontline communities which are currently under fire. Just to show the statistics, in according to the official data of the Office of the Prosecutor General, as of now, more than 159,000 war crimes were committed and documented by Russian army in Ukraine since only the start of the full-scale invasion. So you should understand that this number is far, far more if to talk about the real war started from 2014. To talk about the most common human rights violations that we document in the temporary occupied territories, we witnessed systematic violations that are aimed at suppressing the Ukrainian identity, first of all, and consolidating the control over the people and over the territories. This includes arbitrary detentions and enforced disappearance. So, as we've seen in the movies, civilians are killed and civilians are routinely abducted. They're imprisoned without any charges, and often after this imprisonment, they are subject to the tortures. Tortures and ill treatment is widespread and systematic. They're affecting both civilians and the prisoners of war. And the Russian army, of course, continues to do so. And with the reports of physical and psychological abuse, sexual violence, and even mock arbitrary executions. We also document unlawful deportation and forcible transfer, namely about the children. So, as far as you know, thousands of the Ukrainian children have been forcibly transferred to the Russian Federation or to the temporary occupied territories of the Russian Federation, often for so-called re-education or adoption or anything other which actually aim to change their identity from the Ukrainians to Russians. As of now, the officially confirmed number of those children is 19,546, and we should understand that it's a blatant violation of the international law, and the Office of Ombudsman always addresses those issues on any international platform we have the opportunity to. Other cases include the forcible purposization or the so-called restriction of movement. So the Russian authorities, the Russian armed forces, they force Ukrainian citizens to accept the Russian passports to limit their ability to move freely or to access the essential services on the temporary occupied territories. Of course, as we've seen again from the movies, the suppression of the freedom of expression, the assembly and the religion is on the high scale again, and any dissent or expression of the Ukrainian identity is met with severe repression. And since the beginning of the occupation, I can say that those violations only deepened. Russia has systematically persecuted religious communities in the temporary occupied territories, and churches have been closed, seized, destroyed. Religious leaders, including of almost all the religion communities who refuse to cooperate with occupation authorities, have been subject to intimidation, unlawful detention, torture, and again, even extrajudicial killings. Even if we can talk about the deliberated territories or the front line, even after the end of the direct occupation, the impact of the Russian aggression continues to manifest in severe human rights challenges on these territories. And again, as you have seen from the movie, attacks on civilians and on the civilian infrastructure is a common for Russian armed forces. So they shelling, they missile strokes, the drone attacks, they continue to cause mass casualties, destroy the homes, and cripple essential services. Again, the mines and the explosive remnants of war, which pose constant threat to any people who are located on the occupied territories. Lack of access to the essential services like healthcare, education, the social services, all of it actually is what people are facing on the deliberated territories and what we're documenting on the daily routine, as I can say. And again, we should understand that the psychological trauma that the civilian population, particularly again children, which suffer from the psychological distress, from the constant threat of violence, and from what they have already seen from the Russian armed forces, that's all what we face currently from the Russian occupying forces.
Thanks very much, Mihailo. We're gonna come back to you. I appreciate the opening comment there, but I have to go to the mayor now, Mr. Oleksandr Sinkevich, the mayor of Mykolaiv. Mr. Mayor, the film shows the really grave situation in Kherson, and we heard from Zach and from Mihailo, that conditions in these kinds of places have now even gotten worse. Your city is also not that far from the front line. Can you describe what life is like in Mykolaiv these days?
Hello, do you hear me?
Yes.
Thank you for the invitation. I would say that Mykolaiv now is in better situation than Kherson, but we experienced that the whole 2022 before the liberation of Kherson. We were attacked from Kherson area, and we were attacked with the different types of ammunition, including artillery and big, let's say, ballistic rockets with the amount of minimum of 2 and maximum of 42. The city of Mykolaiv now has a lot of destroyed buildings and infrastructure objects, so we are not so interested anymore for Russian attacks. So they are terrorizing us only by taking our critical infrastructure like water supply, heating supply enterprises, and electricity substations. Especially they do this in winter time when we freezing, let's say, to freeze just citizens in the city of Mykolaiv. But for now, we have attacks of, let's say, simultaneous drones attacks. Sometimes these are ballistic rockets, but surely we have less attack than Kherson because between us and frontline there is a Kherson city. We have a lot of internally displaced person from Kherson, and we even have people who live in Mykolaiv from Kherson, but they on a daily basis they go to Kherson, work there, and come back to Mykolaiv to sleep here overnight. So I would say that we are in better situation, and we understand that. We know how it was. 183 people, 86 people died, civilians died while this wartime in the full-scale invasion in the city of Mykolaiv. 3 of them were children. All of them were just civilians who were killed in their houses, mainly in their apartments of the multi-apartment buildings or in their private houses. As it was just said by Mihailo, that those attacks are made per purpose, so they know where they shoot, and they don't even mask it under attacks on the critical or military infrastructure. They just terrorizing people, saying in the Telegram channels and propaganda media that you have to give up, you have to leave the city, and Russians will win in this war. So don't even don't think about your liberty. Mykolaiv is a Russian region, but we showed to the world and to Russians that we don't wait for them with the flowers, only with the weapon and with our strong resistance.
Thanks very much, Mr. Mayor. A really powerful message there. Reverend Britsin, we watched the film, which details the struggles of a Christian congregation in Kherson under the threat of Russian missiles and drones. What can you tell us about maybe the broader picture of religious freedom or lack thereof in the temporarily occupied territories and in liberated communities as well?
Thank you very much. Just before the Kherson region was liberated, we were deported from our city of Melitopol because of our religious ministry. And September 11th, Russian forces burst out to our church in Melitopol. They stopped worship service. They fingerprint everybody in audience. They arrested me and other ministers. Our church was searched. Our homes were searched, and we were forced to leave our territory. So just in a month, Kherson area was liberated, and as far as we have a lot of friends there, we started our humanitarian mission to this area. If we compare all occupied territory like Lugansk, Donetsk, Zaporizhia, and Kherson, I would say that the worst situation is in Lugansk because there is no registered churches in Lugansk at all, only Moscow Patriarchate, only Russian Orthodox Church. Donetsk area has some registered churches, which was registered in 2016. But since then, no church is registered there, and believers are in huge persecution there. If we compare a situation in occupied territory of Zaporozhye area and occupied area of Kherson area, we can say that the most persecuted churches are in Zaporizhye area. For instance, in Kherson, in occupied territory of Kherson, some Protestant churches continue their ministry during all this year, as long as on Zaporizhye area. By the summer of 2023, all churches were banned. Mariupol, Berdyansk, Primorsk, Melitopol, Energodar, Tokmak, Molochansk, all churches were banned. For instance, our church was third in Melitopol. This church has very long story. It was organized in 1910. They built a building, but in 1936, Soviet government took away that building and killed all priests. In 1944, the community was given another building. In 1949, Soviet government took away that building. We received back our historical building in 1991 during when Ukraine became an independent and started our Church of Grace. It was pretty big church before the war. But in 2022, so Russian government took away that building and they turned it to the Ministry of Culture of Zaporizhye area. They cut across, they draw their heroes, so call it, and they use this building. For this time, 15 church buildings just in one city of Melitopol are taken by Russians, and they use it for police, for their needs. The cruelness there, if we compare these two regions, Kherson occupied territory and Zaporizhye occupied territory, we can say that the repressions on the Zaporizhye region are more bigger, but in the same time, in the Kherson area, we have some cases when priests and pastors were killed by Russians, such as Alexander and Anatoly Prokopchuk, and Maxim Kazachina and Stepan Podolchak. Now the situation is now Russians try to re-register churches in occupied territory by their law, but they have put pretty strong restriction on religious activity. For instance, if community registered, it doesn't mean that their building will return to them. For instance, they have registered churches or communities, but their church buildings used by Russian. No community of Greek Catholic Church on occupied territory. Roman Catholic and Lutheran Church maybe one or two on that territory, and Protestant churches are on continuous pressure.
Mihailo, thanks for giving us that window into the religious component here, religious freedom component. I want to go to our final panelist, Shelby, for this first round of questions here. Shelby, you've followed, and this is something multiple of our panelists have brought up, you followed the issue of Russia's kidnapping of Ukrainian children for years now. And the issue, fortunately, is finally starting to be better understood in the United States and in Europe. But my understanding is that kidnapping isn't the only crime that Russians are committing against children. Is that correct?
Thank you, Andrew. And first, I just want to thank and congratulate Zach on his work. Thank you for partnering with the Atlantic Council and sharing these stories from Kherson. I'm really glad that, as you said, we're getting this human side out. I also encourage everyone to look at Zach's portfolio online because he's got photos and videos from other parts of Ukraine, and I think it's very powerful. Now, Andrew, onto your question. Yes, absolutely. The kidnapping that Russia has done of Ukrainian children is a massive problem, but Russia has gravely harmed Ukrainian children, both intentionally and through their overall assault on civilians beyond just this kidnapping. Mr. Spasov did speak about this, and I'm glad and grateful for all the work that he and his team and others in the Ukrainian government and civil society have done bringing attention to this, because there is much more awareness of this issue now in the West, including at the highest levels of government. And that's partly due to the related charges actually at the International Criminal Court, but also from this advocacy efforts. And even in the US this spring, we actually saw that President Trump said he would work with Russia and Ukraine to help ensure these children are returned. And I'm really hoping he can follow through on that. We've also seen a bipartisan group of senators raise this repeatedly. There's been a co-sponsored resolution calling for the children's return. And with all this increased attention that we continue to see, the issue is rightfully being raised in discussions and tied to the conversations about ceasefires and peace agreements. But there's been minimal progress. Most of the children are still in occupied territory or in Russia. So leaders, especially Trump, but not limited to him, need to apply far greater pressure on Putin for their return, because that can happen immediately. But as you said, Russia's abuses against Ukrainian children go beyond kidnapping. Mr. Spasov laid out many of the crimes that have been committed by Russia against Ukrainians overall, and children have not been spared from these crimes. There was a March 2025 UN report that looked at the impact of Russian war and occupation on children in Ukraine, and they listed every crime that's already been mentioned as being committed against children as well. But I especially want to mention that in the Russian occupied territories, there are cases where children have been executed, they've been experienced arbitrary detention, they've experienced conflict-related sexual violence, torture, ill treatment, and brainwashing. And this can be children of a very young age as well. And this is a huge problem and also huge numbers. There's an estimated 1.6 million Ukrainian children that are still living in areas that Russia's occupying. Then we've also got the children that are in areas that are liberated. And then, as Zach mentioned, kids all around the country, all Ukrainians are experiencing the war. These violations are part of a broader pattern of Russian crimes against civilians. And we see some of these attacks intensifying, like against civilian infrastructure, destroying apartment buildings where kids are just trying to sleep at night, and children are always harmed during war, and Russia is not sparing about them. And I do want to note that I think that talking about the children is very important. I'm glad that our other panelists have already mentioned them, but Russia is attacking all Ukrainians, and vulnerable populations are always the ones that are most affected. We know that the elderly, especially in frontline and occupied areas, are also deeply impacted. And again, I just want to emphasize that these actions all violate international law and norms that have been designed to protect children in conflict. The kidnapping is one war crime, but it's part of a larger strategy that Russia is using, trying to erase Ukrainian identity, intimidate them, and use their violence. This is not collateral damage, it's systematic, and it's part of Russia's tactics.
Thanks very much, Shelby. I think the way you ended there is the key point, that this isn't by accident. This isn't, collateral damage, as you said. This is exactly what Russia's trying to do, and we heard that from Zach as well. I have one more round of questions for our panelists here, but I encourage everyone watching online to submit your own questions at askac.org, and I'll pitch them in the last few minutes to our panelists here. So for the final rounds, we're going to start again with Mr. Spasov. Mr. Spasov, what do you wish international human rights organizations and the international community in general understood better about the human rights situation in frontline communities in Ukraine?
Thank you, Andrew. Thank you for this question, and thank you for all the panelists for highlighting the actual evil deeds by Russian Federation. You have heard various aspects of that. And again, if to talk about the international community and if to talk about what we want to see from them is, of course, everyone needs to understand that we're not fighting just with an enemy. We are fighting with an enemy who wants to get rid of Ukrainians, who wants to get rid of our identity, who wants Ukraine, Ukrainians, and Ukrainian heritage and everything that is somehow connected to it to disappear from this earth. And unfortunately, we don't understand that those actions will continue until they will be stopped in the military way. We do understand that, of course, all the diplomatic deeds, actions by our international partners is highly appreciated. But as Mr. Mayor said, we don't want to greet them with flowers. And again, we don't want to greet them with the papers. We don't want them to greet them with a new Budapest memorandum or any other kind of such documents. We want to actually stop them on the battlefield, and in order to do so, we need your support in that regard. So I kindly ask the international community, international organization, the world leaders to support Ukraine in the military way in order for us to stop the Russian aggression. Because if we will not stop them, if we will not succeed, then I don't know what actually will happen to the modern world and who will be next. It's only like an open question. So my message is direct: support us in the military way, because we really need to win this war for each and every of you, for the first and utmost. Thank you.
Thank you, Mihailo. Turning back to you, Mr. Mayor. In 2022, Mykolaiv was a bulwark against Russia's advance in the south, and your city's defenders eventually pushed the Russians back from the city. What do cities like Mykolaiv and Kherson need to stop Russia from trying to reinvade, as we hear reports about them trying to reman their units in the south?
Yeah, you're right. Mykolaiv got a status city hero by President of Ukraine because we stopped the Russian invasion on the south of Ukraine. We pushed Russians back from where they come to us, and they stayed in Kherson for another 8 months. Actually, I need to remind that since April 12, 2022, Mykolaiv lives without drinking water in our pipes because our water pumping station and water source, Dnieper River, was blocked by Russians, and our pipes that brought us fresh water to the city were destroyed by Russians. Again, terror. But I would say that today, Ukrainians are fighting not only for the existence of our nation, for our country, but we are fighting for the Western civilization, because after the World War II, there was a world order accepted by the United Nations and all the countries around the world. But Russia broke that. Again, we just heard about Budapest Memorandum, where Russia and the United States and other countries were guaranteed us the territory of our country and defense. And now we have a conversation about if we need to help to Ukraine or do we have to do it? Yes. We all need to do it, because to build a new rocket, you need like a couple of months. To build a tank, you need also like 3 months. To build any kind of equipment, you can have a time up to 1 year. But to build a warrior, you need at least 25 years in Ukraine. And we are running out of this resource. We are running out of people because we are losing the most expensive and let's say the resource that has no value. We are losing our lives. We are losing best of our people in that fight, because Putin uses his criminals and all other kinds of people who they're sent just on mid-storms, and they get rid of them. But I would say we are defending our territory and the Western civilization. We're losing the best part of our country, our defenders. So for sure, I would tell that Mihailo said really right thing. We need your assistance. We need your help. We need weapon, and we need it as soon as possible. We need it yesterday, because all these negotiations, they are just a waste of time. And while we are wasting this time, we are losing our lives. And we can live without water, without public transportation, even without food in a cold apartments and houses without a centralized heating. But we need to be sure that we are not the only one on this in this fight, and we help support your support. I mean, our friends and our the countries that support us as soon as possible. So I need you to broadcast this message to the world and to United States citizens that surely they are spending money on that support. But in the same time, we are losing our lives to survive and to keep this world order.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. My next question is for Reverend Britson, and it's about, I think, one of the things that the mayor referenced, which is this so-called debate about whether the U.S. or other countries should support Ukraine or should not support Ukraine. And one of the arguments that some people use against supporting Ukraine is to say that, oh, Russia is a paradise for Christians, that you can live your conservative Christian values in Russia. Mihailo, your organization also works in Russia. Is that really the case? Is Russia a paradise for Christians? You're on mute now, but there you go.
Yeah. Actually, I'm involved in activities of two religious community. One of them is Church of Grace, which is just Protestant church in Ukraine, which relocate from Melitopol to Zaporizhia. And I am a pastor of that church. And actually, I'm a director of Religious Freedom Initiative of the Mission Eurasia. So as a Church of Grace, we work in Ukraine. The 400 members of my church were forced to leave Melitopol, and they live in 17 countries. I became an international pastor, and we understand the situation in Europe, in US, and I'd like really to thank you, all these countries, all these people who accept refugees from Ukraine. And as a director of Mission Eurasia, working with area of religious freedom, just now we are working with the report about the state of religious freedom in Russia. And I can say with confidence that the recent year of situation with religious freedom in Russia became significantly worse. Since 2010, the legislative framework became changed in order to control everything, every religious activity in Russia. The Yarovaya laws, the Lazovaya amendments, the restriction in area of mission, it became worse and worse. From 2020 to 2024, 1,140 cases regarding violation of rules of the religious sphere. The total amount of fines of this period was 3.5 million rubles. For other years, the Orthodox Church changed their rhetoric, and it became just an ideological strength for Kremlin regime. They tried to force their own people, their own priests and believers. Can you imagine that a priest tried to change one word in their prayer and he was punished? In official prayer for the Russia Orthodox Church should be said, God, we ask you for victory. And that priest prayed, God, we ask you for peace. And this priest banned from that ministry. Jehovah's Witnesses are being brutally persecuted in Russia. Dozens and dozens have already been arrested and sentenced to prison. Why Jehovah's Witnesses? It's most peaceful, more apolitical people. Why they became an extremist in Russia? The media is used as a tool of pressure due to lies, a causing wave of hatred against Protestant and all those who don't support Kremlin regime. Unregistered churches in Russia is subject of harassment. Unregistered churches is special Soviet Union phenomena. They didn't register their activities, but for years and years they exist in Russia. Only now the huge wave against these churches just arose. Kurgansk, Belorechynsk, Tula. And as we look on all these cases, we can say that Russia gradually slid into dictatorship.
Yeah.
And maybe they had a chance to be a democratic state in early 90s, but not now, because they used the last wage as a church to combine all of that, to gather everything, and to use just to support Kremlin ideology of Ruski Mir. It's not a church.
Yeah.
It's not a paradise. I still remember Soviet Union, and it's now what we have in Russia. It's the worst version of Soviet Union.
Thank you very much, Reverend. Really interesting and useful insights there. Shelby, final question to you, and then I want to get one or two from the audience here. Help us think about how, what should the West do to support Ukraine, to uphold human rights, and to hold Russia accountable for these abuses and violations? What are steps we can do today, and what are things that'll take more time?
Thank you, Andrew, and I'll be brief. I agree with everything that's been said so far. One of the most interesting things, actually, that I've witnessed throughout the full-scale invasion is the shift in the power I've seen within the human rights community. So even Zach mentioned the Nobel Peace Prize winner. She's a human rights defender, and she's calling for weapons and security. You see this around other human rights defenders, activists, and organizations, because really, if you want to protect human rights, if you want peace, Ukraine needs weapons, they need security. So that's the short term, the midterm, the long term answer. Get weapons there, get them immediately. And that is needed for the long term security. Get Russia out of Ukraine, liberate as much territory as possible. Of course, there's other things that I can add. There's important work on documentation of human rights abuses, accountability efforts. And one other thing I want to mention is Ukraine's reconstruction. There can be an emphasis on trauma recovery, reintegration, that human element. But there's also this big pot of frozen Russian assets that could be used for Ukraine's security and recovery. That could include reparation for victims. So final point is weapons, security, and use the assets.
Thanks, Shelby. So one question in the chat here, this comes from Gina from our audience, asks, what are some areas where U.S. and international aid could help support communities in liberated Ukrainian territories? And I want to broaden that out a little bit and ask each one of our panelists, what is the one most important thing that you think frontline communities in Ukraine need or could use from the international community? And please be very brief. We'll start with you, Mihailo Spasov. One thing.
Thank you for this question. And again, it was said before, weapons. Weapons is what we actually need, not only on the front line, but everywhere, because each and every city, each and every location in Ukraine currently are under constant shellings. There is no place, no safe place on the territory of Ukraine. So we need each and every weapon that we might get currently.
Thank you. Mr. Mayor?
Putin doesn't respect any, laws or any kind. He sends people to kill other people, and he kills people of his country, proclaiming the Christianity of his country. But the most valuable thing in Christianity is life, especially the life of your neighbor. He doesn't respect any laws as any barbarian. He respects only for brutal force. So we need to be armed, well armed, and he needs to afraid us. And we need this help from you now to make our territories untouchable and ready to attack Russia in case they attack us again and again. So weapon and defense and all other types of weapons.
Perfect. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Mihailo Britsin.
You know, I am representative of very pacifistic circles, so I couldn't cry that we need weapon. But the Bible said that you don't need to communicate, you don't need to eat with the evil one. So my answer is sanctions, the strongest sanctions. And I'm amazed, I'm astonished, I disappointed the weakness of reaction of world circles since 2014, the Crimean occupation. You don't need to trade with Russia. You don't need to have any sports connection, cultural connection. Don't talk with them. Just isolate them. I understand, I remember why Soviet Union collapsed just because the oil became $16 per barrel. So
Yeah.
I know it's pretty big loss for Europe and for US and the rest of the world not to have the natural gas of that. But the price of other side could be much worse than not just to pay a little bit more for gasoline. So no trades, no, and sanction for those who try to go just behind of all this restriction. No
Right. So we have
diplomacy there.
weapons,
Yeah.
we have sanctions. Shelby, anything else?
Money.
Money.
So weapons are important, sanctions are important, but if you're just an individual, one thing you can also do is support financially. There are amazing Ukrainian organizations working in frontline communities. They're helping with all necessities, evacuations, etc. Give to them, and I say give to Ukrainian organizations.
Super. That's all the time we have for today. Thank you very much to our excellent panelists, Mihailo Britsin, Shelby Magid, Oleksandr Sienkiewicz, and Mihailo Spasov for sharing your expertise and your insights with us today. And again, a huge thank you to Zachary Tarrant for making the film Being Near, Faith in the Frontline City of Kherson. For our audience, you'll be able to find a link to the film on the event webpage, exactly where you clicked register or to watch this event. So please do share that with your colleagues, your friends, your family, and keep Ukraine's frontline communities and their citizens at the front of your minds. You know, even as you're reading the news from Ukraine, from DC, from elsewhere, it's important to keep, as was said earlier in this discussion, the human stories, the human lives, and the knowledge that everything affects real people. Important to keep that in mind as we do our daily lives all around the world. So again, thank you all for watching and hope to see you all again soon.